What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Thanks for checking out the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe because we have so many fun things that we do all the time. This past weekend, we were talking all things 2021 Dallas Cowboys draft class. And guess what? The talk continues today. We are talking about the Dallas Cowboys undrafted free agent class that consists of 13 players. And to do so, we are bringing in the one, the only, the legendary Connor Livesay. Connor, how goes it? It's time to talk some UDFAs.
Yes, these are always fun because everybody knows the guys who normally get drafted on the first 2 days, some of the guys who get drafted on day 3, and then UDFA is when you really have to have done a ton of work to know many of those guys. And then, there's still guys that get picked up that you just haven't watched, haven't heard of. So this is the fun part because it's like the second part of the draft where you go back in and start watching guys you didn't watch and get familiar with guys you don't know a whole lot about.
So it's kind of a little bit of a humble brag. Like you have to have done a lot of work as you're the guy who's going to do it. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, I've done all the work. Connor Livesay's draft guide, by the way, still available, $5. A nice way to go kind of cross-reference all the players the Cowboys drafted and the undrafted free agents. How many prospects total, Connor? 200? Is that right?
I did. I graded 250 and ended up watching like 292 total. I didn't rank 250 to 300 pretty much just because at that point it's just you're ranking 7th rounders. So it's kind of like throw them into a hat and pick a name out of the hat. It's kind of what you're doing at that point. But rank top 250, which kind of gives you almost a full draft worth of rankings where you see them. And then I had 30 to 40 other guys that I watched and fell into place, but I didn't really give them a specific grade. It was kind of just like I see these guys as 7th rounders or priority free agents.
Okay, well, let's talk about some free agents. And the Dallas Cowboys, again, have a free agent class that consists, their draft class is obviously impressive, 11 players altogether. And everybody knows about all these guys. Stephen Jones said on 105.3 The Fan on Monday that he thinks all 11 could make the roster. Stephen's being a little bit kind, I think. I don't see a situation where 11 of these guys make the roster, especially if any of these other players make the roster. The Dallas Cowboys 2021 undrafted free agent class, again, sitting at 13 players. Some hometown guys in terms of the state of Texas. A lot of people, Connor, one of the first names the Cowboys landed as undrafted free agency began was Jaquan Hardy, the running back out of Tiffin. During the live show, we had a lot of people go, "What is Tiffin?"
Right.
So your thoughts. Let's start there. First name on the list. Cowboy. This is possible that right now there are only 2 running backs really cemented on the team. So a possibility, of him cracking the roster when it's all said and done.
Yeah, he actually made my sleepers list in the draft guide. Last page of the draft guide, I had a sleepers list, and he was actually on it. And again, he's a Division II athlete, so he's not going to he's not going to be a 4.3 guy. He's undersized at 5'9". He's 210 pounds, probably played like 205 pounds, but a solid athlete. He ran like a 4.5, 4.49 at his pro day. Not overly explosive, and he's undersized, which is obviously why you're going to go undrafted. And then when you add in that you're a Division II, small school Division II prospect, you just don't have a lot of teams beating down your door. But I think the kid can play. The few games that I did watch on him, which watching Division II tape, a lot of the times you have to go on YouTube and you don't have all 22, or you do get all 22 and you get 1 or 2 games. But the few games that I did watch of him, he's a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield. Did a really nice job in pass protection too. I think that's something and again, it's Division II level, so you're not blocking Micah Parsons on blitzes. You're not blocking these big, super freaky athletic dudes on blitzes. But I think he's a guy who can succeed in pass protection. He can play on 3rd downs. And then his vision and explosiveness, even though he didn't test like an explosive athlete, I thought showed up on tape at the Division II level, which makes you think there could be some translatable traits there for the NFL.
Is he the first player from Tiffin that you've ever watched?
Yes. Absolutely.
Do you recall what Tiffin's mascot is during your YouTube studies?
I do not.
They are the Tiffin Dragons. For anybody who is unaware out there,
Does their logo look just like UAB's logo?
A little bit, yeah. So
I do remember. I mean, I would have never answered that question, but I remember watching that and being like, "Are they playing?" Like wherever I was watching, I was like, "Are they playing at like UAB or something?" And then I was like, "That doesn't make any sense." So,
hey, I mean, sometimes like you look at all these schools, and I actually saw the Cowboys, the mothership, DallasCowboys.com, tweeted out talking about Nick Eubanks, how the Cowboys brought in a tight end out of Michigan in undrafted free agency for the second year in a row. I guess that's another direction we can go in right now. Tight end. Obviously, you know, there were a lot of people who wanted to see the Cowboys draft Kyle Pitts. That dream died early on Thursday night. But this team does, I mean, people like Sean McKeon, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to get rid of him from the roster or anything like that. But I mean, you know, if we're looking at available roster spots on the overall 53-man roster, I think tight end 3 is definitely one of them. You've got Blake Jarwin and Dalton Schultz obviously entrenched at the top, but talk to us about Nick Eubanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy who's got a shot to make the roster. He's kind of like your Brevin Jordan light prospect, a guy who did get drafted. I think he ended up going day 3, if I'm not mistaken, which was a lot later than I thought Brevin Jordan out of Miami would go. But you know, he's 6'4", 245 pounds. He's a pretty good athlete, 4.59 at his pro day. He ran a 7.03 3-cone drill, so he's not like a stiff dude as a route runner. Jumped 34 inches on the vertical jump and then 10 plus 1 on the broad jump. So I think he's a guy who can be a good athlete. He can be that inline style of guy who can threaten the seam a little bit. Kind of what we saw from Blake Jarwin his first year getting playing time. Where like now you see Blake Jarwin, you kind of see him as that like big slot where he lines up. You know, it's like, man, is that Blake Jarwin or is that a receiver? But the first year he was in Jason Garrett's offense, he did a lot of inline stuff behind Jason Witten. So you know, it's kind of that role, I think. And Blake Jarwin was obviously a UDFA, but a guy who's gonna, you know, take time as a blocker to really develop. He's kind of more of a getting away guy than a sit there, you know, really, you know, at the point of attack, be strong, lock out and control guys. But he's a guy that you can line up in line. He can do some things as a blocker. He can run that short to intermediate route trade pretty good. But I think his best chance at, you know, locking onto this roster or another roster is the work he'll be able to do up the seam, really, you know, splitting the seam defenders, getting in between those corners and safeties and making his money in that like intermediate to deeper portion of the field because of his athleticism and ball skills in that portion of the field.
You mentioned Blake Jarwin as another undrafted free agent back in 2017. I don't think people realize the butterfly effect that we're still living in because of Blake Jarwin. He was on the Cowboys practice squad for a majority of that season. People will remember that was, of course, the year that the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl, and the Eagles wanted to poach him off the Cowboys practice squad late in the year. And it was Blake Jarwin that finally pushed the Cowboys to finally cut Kellen Moore and really begin his coaching career, which is now such a huge part of, obviously, the evaluation that goes into all these players, how they would project into Kellen's offense. What's more is, I mean, you know, maybe Blake Jarwin ends up on the Eagles, wins a Super Bowl. Maybe they don't draft Dallas Goedert. I mean, like I said, the butterfly effect looms very large behind the Cowboys promoting Blake Jarwin late in 2017. I'm really excited, I think, to watch all these guys because we're going to get to watch all these guys. We're still not totally certain, but it seems like preseason is going to be a thing this year. And so the undrafted free agent class across the NFL has a much better shot of sticking on NFL rosters, I think, this year, just because they'll have opportunities to shine. Let's talk about, let's stay on the offensive side of the ball, Connor. A lot of people pumped, obviously, about Osiris Mitchell from Mississippi State. I believe this is the first Bulldog the Cowboys have brought in since drafting Dak Prescott 5 years ago. There were a lot of people, certainly offensively, a lot of people, you'll recall, that wanted them to draft Fred Ross, his actual, you know, wide receiver when he was there at Mississippi State. But so not like he played with Osiris Mitchell, but still he gets somebody with a familiar background to his.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the linebacker last year who went pretty high out of Mississippi State. It was a good player. He went super high, like to a good team, but he was a good player too. But yeah, just getting off topic. But Osiris Mitchell, we actually had him on our podcast talking the draft. He was one of the first guys we had on this year, and it was cool because like going into the interview, I didn't know a ton about Osiris Mitchell. You know, he's a big, long, physical guy that'll probably, I think, make his living more in the slot than he will outside, even though he has that, you know, X body style. He even mentioned that he liked playing in the slot. he mentioned he was a really fun interview. If you got time, go and check that interview out because he talked a lot about Mike Leach. And like most people, when you ask him about coaches and stuff, you know, they're kind of like, oh, you know, great guy. But he was honestly like playing for Mike Leach was one of the craziest things like ever. Like not in like the sense of like, oh, like it's Mike Leach, but like that guy's a nut. Like I'm pretty sure he said that at one point in the interview, and it was funny because he was like not holding back at all. We asked him about the big fight at the end of the year between Mississippi State and I can't remember who else was in that fight, but the big fight at the end of the year that everyone talked about, where Mike Leach was in the stands taking videos with the crowd as his whole benches was clearing and people were fighting. Gave a super cool answer to that. So, you know, it was a fun interview. And he's a guy who, like I said, like he has the body type to play that X receiver position, but I think he'll probably move in as that big slot style receiver because he's got so much good size and he's not a bad athlete. So I think he can win his one-on-one man coverage reps from the slot more so than the outside because of his struggles to beat press coverage and his release packages that he possesses.
Interesting. I think if an undrafted free agent makes this roster and we're still really far out from training camp and everything like that, it feels like wide receiver is the spot. With all due respect to Simi Fehoko is coming in, but that the Cowboys have a long-standing history, Connor, as we kind of take a little bit of a segue just to kind of look at notable undrafted free agents that have been on the Cowboys roster recently. Obviously, the group headlined by Tony Romo, Miles Austin. People forget Dan Bailey was an undrafted free agent. Kellen Moore went undrafted himself, although originally signed with the Detroit Lions in 2012. I definitely want to talk to you about a particular safety that's part of this undrafted free agency class for the Cowboys, but Jeff Heath took that path. Lyle Collins went undrafted for very specific, very outlier reason, but still nonetheless an undrafted free agent. But I mentioned wide receivers. Lucky Whitehead cracked this team's roster in 2015. And if that's possible, I mean, Osiris Mitchell making the team is definitely not out of, you know, harm's reach or whatever.
Yeah, and they kind of had, you know, a certain style of, you know, body type receiver they were looking for because, you know, Brennan Eagles is a relatively thickly built dude. And then Osiris Mitchell is obviously a big dude. And then TJ Vasher out of Texas Tech is super big. So like they were targeting those big, long, physical guys, which if you go back to Mike McCarthy's history, you know, he kind of his Jordy Nelsons and Greg Jennings, they're all like bigger style receivers. So that might just be a Mike McCarthy thing. I don't know, but they were definitely looking for that 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". And like I said, TJ Vasher, I think measured in at 6'6". So he's a big undrafted, even Simi Fehoko is a 6'4", you know, 220-pound guy. So they definitely were looking at the bigger receivers in the draft. And then obviously in UDFA.
When you look, Connor, at the number of undrafted free agent players that are currently on the Cowboys roster, obviously Blake Jarwin, we've talked about, was a UDFA back in 2017. Luke Gifford, somebody who a lot of people loved in 2019, got hurt. And that's another butterfly effect to look back on. Does he make the roster in 2019 if he's hurt? That did allow the Cowboys to kind of stash him that year, as we talk about in different instances during the preseason period. And then I think the most notable free agents, with no disrespect to Blake Jarwin, you know, in terms of play time last year, obviously Blake missed most of the season. Brandon Knight and Terrence Steele. I mean, the Cowboys love undrafted free agents. Like this isn't like a, you know, this isn't like a joke. Like they have a history. This is a team where, again, generally speaking, you have a better chance of making the roster as an undrafted free agent than maybe somewhere else.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like, you know, we pulled up the list, like Jeff Heath, he started games for this team for 3-4 years. And he's UDFA. Dan Bailey, I mean, it's a kicker, but, you know, it's just they don't – as much as they do preference like draft where they were drafted and how much they make, they do give their UDFA guys a shots if they like them. It's like there's no like rhyme or reason behind it, but like the Jalen Smith thing, like we pay him a lot of money, we drafted him high, he's going to get playing time. You know, we don't want to get Francis Bernard on the field because, you know, he's a UDFA, but like – there's certainly instances throughout the last few years where like they give those guys a shot. It's just, I don't know what it is that gets those guys shots, but you know, Francis Bernard and those guys need to figure it out because they've given them out, you know, for sure over the last few years.
Francis Bernard, of course, a part of that crew, somebody that we had on here on the YouTube channel, the podcast network. People can go back and listen to that or watch that interview. You mentioned Connor TJ Vasher. If you had to pick a receiver, because when we get to that time of year, there will be a lot of people picking pet cats, and I think a lot of people will gravitate towards Simi Fehoko, but the hipsters of the world don't like to necessarily take draft picks. Which receiver, if you had to bet your life savings, would you gamble on making the Cowboys 53-man roster?
Out of just the UDFA class?
Right, correct.
Okay, all right.
Because to your point, there will be a deference to Simi Fehoko in that we spent a draft pick on him. This is a different.
They're more likely to keep him over one of these guys for sure, just because of the capital they spent. I would say it would come down to Mitchell and Vasher, and I'll just go with Vasher because of how freaky long and how good his ball skills are. They kind of lack that like legit red zone threat, is a big, we talked about it with Des Bryant for years, but that big just jump ball, 50-50 back shoulder fade style receiver. And Vasher did that a ton down the field at Texas Tech. So I feel like while Osiris Mitchell is big and physical, I don't see those type of skills in Mitchell's game that Vasher possesses, and that's like the one thing this receiving core doesn't have. I mean, CeeDee Lamb could go up and get the football, but he's 6 foot. He's not 6'6". So Vasher gives you just a freaky element of size and length, and then obviously he showed ball skills at Texas Tech. He's just not a great athlete, and he's not the type of style of dude who's just going to consistently beat man coverage or zone coverage because of his lack of like twitch and suddenness as a route runner. But if you need, a guy to get on the field on, 3rd and goal to win a game, like even just putting him out there, a defense has to kind of zone in on him in those red zone trips because of his freaky size. So I'll go with Vasher. And I don't know if any of these guys make the team just because of how deep they are at receiver. But if I had to bet, like you said, I'd say Vasher.
Well, you mentioned Vasher. A lot of Cowboys fans once upon a time had their hearts set on a different undrafted free agent, Texas Tech wide receiver making the team. Shout out, of course, to Danny Amendola. One of the greatest undrafted free agent wide receivers in NFL history was out of Texas Tech and Wes Welker, although you could certainly put Danny Amendola in that group as well. Cole Beasley. We didn't even mention Cole Beasley as an undrafted free agent wide receiver. That's the thing. Like, the Cowboys have so many that it's easy to kind of forget. Yeah. We've got a linebacker in the group this year, Connor, out of Texas A&M, of course, my alma mater. Anthony Hines III. I wanted to ask you this or about this just from a philosophical standpoint. I think looking at the positional pathways here, I think he has the hardest road ahead of him just because the Cowboys, while they did not pick up Leighton Vander Esch's fifth-year option, I mean, he is still a part of the team. They've obviously got Jalen Smith, and you mentioned there's nothing happening there. They just drafted 2 linebackers. They already have 2 that we've mentioned that are part of this group in terms of Luke Gifford and Francis Bernard. Anthony Hines, the point here is it's a long road ahead for him if he wants to make this particular roster.
Yeah, and he's a perfect like practice squad dude, though. A guy who they don't necessarily need him on the roster. He's a guy who can play special teams, has some intriguing qualities about him, but again, like the safety that I think we're getting ready to talk about, like, he has a legit chance to probably make the roster because they don't have a player that has his type of athleticism and stuff. But for Hines, unless they move on from Jalen Smith or trade, Leighton Vander Esch or something like that, he's got 7 dudes ahead of him who have a better, who are going to make the roster over him just from a money standpoint, from a talent standpoint, and then from a draft pick standpoint this year. So it's hard to envision them carrying, that many linebackers, and linebacker could be a position that if they do, I don't know why, but like people keep bringing up like KJ Wright. I saw that a bunch today, and I'm like, why would they add another free agent linebacker? Like they just drafted 2. They drafted 2 starting caliber linebackers. They have 2 highly paid, highly valued linebackers already on the roster, and then they have 2 young guys that they seem to like. So free agent linebackers don't make any sense to me, but I've saw that brought up a few times today.
Yeah, people throw out the term progress stopper a lot when it comes to like older veterans. The kind of people love to say like, bring them in on a 1-year deal. It's like, yeah, but that's a progress stopper. Like that's your classic progress stopper. And KJ Wright would be a progress stopper. I think you could make an argument that at the linebacker position that right now, Leighton Vander Esch and even Jalen Smith are progress stoppers to Micah Parsons and Jabril Cox. And so if you're the Cowboys, you just spent 2 picks in the top 115. One of those players, could have gone a lot sooner if the draft hadn't broke this particular way. I mean, I think you want to get them on the field as soon as possible. Again, Stephen Jones's words aside, the Cowboys' words aside, they're saying, oh, yeah, we're not picking up Leighton's option, but we would love to have him around for the future. It's like, you literally decided not to do that. So it is what it is. The last player, Cole, that I wanted to talk about with you today, you mentioned, you kind of, ruined it, spoiler alert and everything. Tyler Cole out of Purdue. A lot of people in the comments were really excited about him during the live show, as mentioned. You kind of hinted at it, but a hybrid. Safety linebacker hybrid. In fact, I think you said the Cowboys don't really have anybody in that mold. I think the closest person right now might in fact be Jabril Cox, who they drafted. Well, who's the last person that kind of fit this mold for the Cowboys?
The last person that they added that fits this style of player?
The last player that played for the Dallas Cowboys that fits the style of player that Tyler Cole is?
Jeff Heath.
So you just lost a lot of people there.
There might have been somebody. Well, there might have been somebody else. It's just like, I think Tyler, like we talked about Jeff Heath a lot. Like he's super fast, which Tyler Cole ran a 4.36 at his pro day. Good athlete, but just like you don't really trust the coverage skills. You don't really trust the overall instincts at the position. Like, do you play him at strong? Do you play him at free? Does he step down and like play around the line of scrimmage? Like, we have those conversations with Jeff Heath a lot, and that's kind of the same conversations I could see them having with Tyler Cole coming in, who played at UConn for 3 of his 4 years in college football, then transferred to Purdue his final year. So he's a guy who I don't know that he makes a roster, but he has pretty impressive athleticism, especially straight line speed, sideline to sideline speed. Like, that's where he'll show up. He's got good range because of those speed and instincts. It's just like when you watch him in coverage at Purdue and at UConn, the games that we've had that I had on him, it's just a guy you don't really trust him. It reminds me a lot of Jeff Heath's game. Like, you didn't want Jeff Heath in coverage against Calvin Johnson or against, what
good times.
We saw how that went. But like, and again, like, even the last few years Jeff Heath was there, we were like, he's gotten better, not a terrible player, but we want to upgrade. And that's kind of the same path that I see Tyler Cole how he's going to get into this league is just by playing with his fast twitch, his instincts, his versatility. He has a linebacker background. He's got the safety background. So he has the versatility to play. And then special teams. Jeff Heath was a stud special teamers. That's why he stuck around so long, and eventually why he got a chance to get a starting spot on this team, because they kept him because of his special teams ability. And Tyler Cole's athleticism, speed, and instincts will show up on special teams, and that'll be a way he can kind of get himself onto the roster.
You mentioned wanting to improve from Jeff Heath. Have they done that? I don't think they have at safety. I mean, it's only been a year, but I would have
loved Jeff Heath last year. Like last year, I'd have been like, Jeff Heath's your best safety. I mean, again, and like people will be like, well, what about Donovan Wilson? But like Donovan Wilson played, I think he started like 4 games or something like that, and there was a lot of ups and downs with Donovan Wilson. We didn't have a lot of playmakers on defense, so Donovan Wilson's playmaking ability like shines is like a blinking light. But there was a lot of times in coverage with Donovan Wilson's where he was just getting targeted, he was getting picked on. So like we want that to improve. But yeah, I think Jeff Heath would have been your best safety last year. So I definitely don't think they've improved on it, but they also haven't really tried to.
Jeff Heath had the first interception on Patrick Mahomes last season, and I believe intercepted him in both games.
Or he had 2 in one game or something. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, but he at least, to your point, or to the point, I guess, he had 2 interceptions off of Mahomes this past season.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the Jeff Heath way, right? Like, all the normal time was just absent. And then like these crazy Herculean moments was when he would show up and shine and be bright, which is kind of the magic of who he was. The Cowboys did not draft a safety, Connor, as you well know, and obviously you're still upset about it. But, I mean, they did draft Israel Mukwamu, who you could qualify as a safety. By the way, we spoke with Israel, great guy, awesome interview. That's available on the YouTube channel and in the podcast feed if you want to go back and listen to or watch it. Super easy guy to root for. So that being said, I think if we're trying to figure out of all of these players, I know I asked you a wide receiver, but I would argue that Tyler Cole has the easiest path or the least intimidating path to making the roster, just because there's nothing in front of him. I know. I mean, yes, the Cowboys signed DeMonte KZ, and that's fine. But we also found out after the draft, when Dan Quinn spoke to the media for the first time as the Cowboys defensive coordinator, that Keanu Neal is sticking at linebacker. The drafting of Micah Parsons and Jabril Cox isn't changing that. And so Tyler Coyle has the fewest amount of bodies in front of him, I think, which is, that might be the one. If you are putting all your life savings, I would advise against that. I don't know why I encouraged it a moment ago. That would maybe be the one that you would want to go in on.
It might be Nick Ralston out of Louisiana. He's a fullback, so he's not sexy, but they moved on from Jameez Olawale. They don't have a fullback on the roster. So,
but they don't need one. You know what I mean?
They don't. I'm just saying, like, if you're looking at it from that standpoint, you're like, which guy's got the best chance? It might be him, because they might be like, well, it's either him or we go with, Sean McKeon or Nick Eubanks as our H-back. But, yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think he probably should have been drafted, especially over some of the DBs, versatile guys that got drafted on day 3. And then I thought Austin Folio out of Oregon should have been drafted too. He had a 7th round. He was one of the 260 players that I watched, 270, 80 players that I watched didn't receive a grade, but he would have had like a 7th round grade for me. He's the same type of player that like your Osa Odighizuwa is, like big, kind of more of a 3 technique, but played defensive end at Oregon. He's a 5 technique. That's what he is, that you're either going to bounce, try to knock weight off of and play him a DN, or, bulk him up a little bit and play him as a full-time 3 tech. But I think Tyler Coyle probably has the best chance, like you said, just based off of his ability, his special teams impact, and then just the versatility that he offers as well. We hear them talk about versatility and position flex still a lot. He offers that.
I want you to answer this as if you were, and I'll let you pick. You can be Mike McCarthy, you can be Stephen Jones, you could be Jerry Jones, you could be Will McClay, you could be Dan Quinn. When we were still live and we were kind of curating all of the, UDFA signings, Darius Washington was not among them. Obviously, he actually ended up signing like a minute after our stream ended with the Baltimore Ravens, or agreeing to sign with them. So again, taking on the profile of any one of those people, generic Cowboys fan asks you, why Tyler Coyle over Darius Washington?
That is a great question. But I think that their answer would be...
It's your answer.
Oh, it's my answer. I don't have
No. That's what I'm saying. No, it's your answer. You're them. You got to be them. Like, get into character here, Connor. Like, you got to answer on behalf of them.
My answer would be, I don't know what the hell we were thinking. We're
okay. So what is
super bad brain fart on our part?
What is their answer then?
Their answer is, we want our DBs to be long, physical, fast, and versatile. That's what, Will McClay went on the post-draft conference and said we wanted to get longer, we wanted to get stronger, we wanted to get faster, we wanted to get more explosive. Something along, I don't know if those are the exact 4 things he said, but Darius Washington is supremely small. He's 5'7", 187 pounds. He's got short arms, and he's not a good athlete. Didn't test like a good athlete. I'm not saying on tape, I thought he played like a solid athlete. He's a guy that I was like, I can't wait to see what he tests like, because he could test solid, but he obviously didn't test well. So when you're not big, you're not long, you're not athletic, you were going to be off the Cowboys' radar. And that's what they would have said.
That's I think that's a fair answer on behalf of them. It's a frustrating answer, certainly, I think, on behalf of everybody else, just because I think people, if you want to sign Darius Washington, he doesn't make the team, so be it. But bring him in, see what's up, quit, being so close-minded at things, because if you're close-minded, that's how you pass on players like Jordan Lewis, right? Well, not that Jordan is amazing, but like, he's an example of a smaller frame guy that can certainly contribute at a high level.
I mean, the 7th round and even like beginning of the 6th round, I think has value, but like from midway through the 6th round to the 7th round, you just treat it like free agency, in my opinion. Like, you look at guys who like, does he play a position that we need? So, safety for Darius Washington, or, edge rusher for Shaka Toney. Does he possess some sort of elite trait that hasn't been developed yet? So either, the speed, the change of direction, the power, something like that. Does he possess that one trait? It doesn't show up on the field, but he's got it. We've seen it. We just need to develop it. That's what I would treat rounds 6.5 through 7 is like free agency, because I'd be like, Darius Washington, James Wiggins, he got drafted in the 7th round. He battled a ton of injuries, but like if you have to cut a 7th rounder because he's not able to stay healthy, so be it. Like it doesn't matter. Like those guys rarely make the roster anyways. But if he is able to stay healthy, then you have a stud athlete playing multiple positions for you, long physical athletic traits. Like use the 6th and 7th round as priority free agency. That way, if you cut them, it was a 6th or 7th rounder. They weren't able to stay healthy. They're off the field stuff. They're, they didn't quite develop. It's fine. Like no fan is going to go, screw those guys. They cut the 7th rounder. Like that's just not going to happen. But if it works out, fans are, again, and like they're obviously not thinking, but like Xavier Woods, like everybody hates Xavier Woods now, but 2 years into his career, they're
huge payoff off of
awesome.
A 6th round pick.
Totally. Starting style, Donovan Wilson. That is the perfect example. Like a dude who isn't even like great by any means, like probably one of the lowest level starting caliber safeties in the league. But fans are like, this guy's legit. Like he's awesome. He creates turnovers and like good player. Don't get me wrong, but like he's still a liability in some areas of his game. But he was a 6th round pick. So it's like any sort of value you can get out of him at all is productive, and like guys aren't going to kill him for it. So,
yeah, they have had success there. Anthony Brown, 6th round pick. You know what I mean? Like they don't all turn into stable starters or even stable contributors, but it truly is the priority portion of priority free agency. Like Rico Gathers, like that didn't work out, but you're in love with that trait. Do it. Spin the pick. Like that way you don't have to compete against anybody for it.
And nobody killed people killed the Cowboys more for moving on from and never giving him an opportunity more so than like him not working out. Like they were like, why isn't Rico Gathers? There's still people who were like, he didn't get a fair shake. And it's just like, well, there's a lot of things unknown about Rico Gathers why I didn't get a fair shake. But no, if you're a fan and you're complaining about a 6th or 7th round pick not working out, like you were looking at this way in the wrong way. Like it's just 90% of those guys will literally never see the field or never do anything productive. So it's just
we didn't mention Kayvon Frazier either. Another 6th round player. Just
special teams, like did a lot of like
and became
things.
Like Jeff Heath. Also, we're talking about the football at all, but also became like quintessential in the locker room, like team leader. First year in Miami last year, he's a team captain. So there's a lot of reason to. I think Kayvon was part of that group in 2016. Where like every player they drafted was a team captain. Do you remember that?
No.
So it was a thing. But okay, Connor, my last question. Yes or no? Not the player, but yes or no. Does one of the players we're looking at right now make the 53-man roster?
Yes. And it'd probably end up being like Artavius Lynn or one of these guys we didn't even mention because we just don't see it. But I don't know when's the last time they didn't keep a UDFA on the Francis Bernard made it last year. Like there's always
for the year before.
Like there's always at least one guy who sticks. And again, like Antoine Woods was a UDFA for another team that they ended up signing. I know that's not the same thing, but like they do give those guys opportunities. It's just either somebody has to really have clicked with them. Like they have to have a Rod Marinelli in that coaching staff where the dude just loves them, like wants to hang on to him. Or they have to be a guy that just shows up and plays, whether it's on special teams, whether it's on defense, whether it's on offense. You have to show up and kick tail. So we'll see who can do that in training camp and preseason.
You have to separate yourself. Lucky Whitehead kind of did that. He had like this thing that only he did.
Right.
Yeah. And so the lucky jet sweep. And so, but the other thing is so much of it is luck. When we had Francis Bernard on, I asked him, I think you remember, during Leighton Vander Esch's like his first press conference during training camp, he mentioned Francis Bernard by name, and like that goes a long way. Right. The ironic part is that Francis might outlast Leighton on the roster now, but still, you're right. Like this is a team and a franchise where historically UDFAs find their way onto the roster. So we'll see who it is. In fact, I'll put it up here one more time, Connor. You mentioned it's probably Artavius Lynn, but if you really did have to say who you really truly thought it would be of this list, my vote is Tyler Coyle, just based on the math of it all, but your vote might be different.
Yeah, that's who I'd go with too, just because I think he's the most talented. He's got the least resistance to a spot, other than Nick, Ralston, who I haven't watched. I saw some clips on today, fullback, running back style of player, but I think that those are the two guys you're looking at. I think Nick Eubanks is a good player. He's got a chance to, if he can beat out Sean McKeon, his former teammate, that's a chance there too, because there's not really a tight end 3 on this roster. I know they signed the kid from Washington. His name's
Sprinkle.
Jeremy Sprinkle, the belt bowl thief. Love him.
Right.
I loved him a few years ago. I was like, this guy can play, man. Like, good little player. And then he went to the belt bowl and stole something. I was like, what an idiot. So you never know with some of these guys, but I think 3 or 4 of them have good chances. Anthony Hines, good player, but I just don't think there's a lot logistical way that he can get into that linebacker room. And then there's so many receivers that it's hard to really pick one out, but one of them might have a chance. It's just they're deep at receiver too. So
see, I will say, I think receiver is the dark horse because I think you agree. Simi Fehoko beating out Noah Brown is fairly probable. Maybe not likely, but like that's a super easy thing to imagine happening, right? So like kind of just like replacing him on the roster. Maybe they carry 6. That would obviously be the path for one of these guys. Or I mean, because he's only on his tender, maybe they move on from Cedric Wilson. And because
bad idea.
It is a bad idea, but there is like. Could you not see that being that news, like that tweet coming out that the Cowboys are moving on from Cedric Wilson, and then like Cowboys fans revolting? There generally is one player like that who people revolt over, and it's like they're keeping TJ Vasher over Cedric Wilson. You know what I mean? But it could just be
me.
Well, hey, but you know what? Cedric might be a good enough guy to give up number 11 for Micah Parsons. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm just like that kind of thing always happens too. You can set your watch by it. So it is what it is. Connor Livesay, it was a lot of fun breaking down the Dallas Cowboys undrafted free agent class with you. He's on Twitter at Connor NFL Draft. I promise you he will say something that upsets you, but then he will find a way to calm you down because that's the way it goes. Connor, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Of course, all the time.